evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Max, and welcome to Fight Boxing Podcast tonight. Tonight, we address one of the most divisive topics in modern sport, transgender participation in women's boxing. Recent headlines, including a controversial piece in The Guardian on Olympic boxing, Russian disinformation, and comments by Thomas Bach, have forced us to re-examine the very principles that underpin competitive fairness. I'm here to lay out a clear, unvarnished argument. When men transition to women, the inherent physical advantages that come from a lifetime of male physiology simply cannot be overlooked, and it's not a fair playing field for biological women. Boxing, at its core, is a sport steeped in tradition and a fierce commitment to fairness. For decades, we've segregated the sport into distinct male and female divisions for very good reasons. It isn't just about keeping things neat, it's about protecting the integrity of the competition. When we allow athletes who were born male to compete in women's divisions, even after transition, we must ask, are we upholding the fairness that all competitors deserve? The recent Guardian article has only added fuel to an already raging debate. It claims that misinformation and politically motivated narratives have clouded the real issue: women's safety, opportunity, and the very essence of what makes sport fair and competitive. Let's talk facts. The difference between male and female physiology is more than just a matter of hormones. It's structural. Men, by virtue of their biological development, tend to have greater muscle mass, denser bone structure, and higher levels of testosterone. Even when hormone therapies are introduced, research suggests that some of these physical advantages persist. It isn't merely a matter of numbers on a lab report, it's about how those numbers translate into strength, speed, and resilience in the ring. Consider the rigorous demands of boxing. It requires explosive power, endurance, and a capacity to absorb and deliver force. When an athlete who has experienced the advantages of male physiology steps into a women's ring, the inherent benefits cannot be entirely negated by hormonal treatments. This creates an environment where the very definition of fairness is challenged. The long-standing division between male and female competition was designed to ensure that contests remain as equitable as possible. When that balance tips even slightly, the consequences can be profound. Boxing isn't just a sport, it's a tradition built over generations. The separation of men's and women's divisions wasn't born out of prejudice or discrimination. It was a practical measure aimed at ensuring fair competition. This distinction has allowed women to carve out their own space in a sport historically dominated by men, providing an arena where female athletes could excel on their own merits. To suddenly blur these divisions with policies that favor inclusion at the expense of fairness does a disservice not only to women boxers, but to the sport as a whole. It sends a message that the achievements of decades, built on the premise of equal conditions, are secondary to ideological narratives. And while inclusivity is a noble goal, it should not come at the cost of compromising the standards and safety that athletes have fought so hard to secure. Let's not skirt around the issue of safety. Boxing is a brutal sport where every match is a test of physical endurance and resilience. When competitors step into the ring, they do so with the expectation that they are facing someone of a similar physical caliber. If an athlete retains even a fraction of the physiological advantages typically seen in males, advantages that may include greater punching power, reach, and overall durability, the risk to female competitors escalates. It's not a matter of personal bias or baseless fear. It's about maintaining an environment where each athlete can compete on equal footing. The safety of boxers is paramount, and if the inclusion of athletes with residual physical advantages compromises that safety, then the system is failing its most fundamental duty. We owe it to our athletes to uphold strict standards that preserve both fairness and security in the ring. Some proponents argue that hormone therapy levels the playing field by reducing testosterone and its associated benefits. However, the evidence is far from conclusive. While hormone therapy does affect muscle mass and strength, many argue, and scientific research increasingly supports the view, that the structural advantages acquired during puberty cannot be entirely undone. In other words, once the body is built in a certain way, some of those differences are simply intrinsic. This isn't an argument of man versus woman in a simplistic sense. It's a call to recognize that the physical differences are rooted in biology. When you have decades of physical development behind you, the legacy of that development lingers, regardless of subsequent hormonal adjustments. Therefore, insisting that hormone therapy can completely neutralize these advantages is not only misleading, but dangerous for the future of fair competition in women's boxing. Given these concerns, the time has come for sporting authorities to re-examine their policies. Inclusion should not override fairness. The policies governing transgender participation in sports must be rooted in a commitment to protecting the competitive integrity that has long defined women's boxing. What we need is a nuanced approach, one that respects the rights and identities of all athletes while acknowledging the unyielding facts of biology. There are calls for developing separate categories or modified rules that can help accommodate diverse identities without compromising the fairness of competition. However, any such solution must be grounded in scientific evidence and a clear-eyed view of the realities on the ground. The dialogue must remain open and robust. It's essential that policymakers, scientists, and athletes come together to find a compromise that honors both inclusion and fairness. Ignoring the physical disparities not only undermines the safety and opportunity of female athletes, but also threatens the very credibility of the sport. In conclusion, this isn't a debate driven by animosity or an unwillingness to accept change. It's a matter of fundamental fairness and the preservation of a legacy that has empowered generations of female athletes. When male-to-female transgender athletes continue to compete in women's boxing without adequate safeguards, the result is an uneven playing field, one where the promise of equal opportunity is compromised by biological realities. We must be willing to confront uncomfortable truths in the name of fairness. Our sports institutions should not be swayed solely by political correctness or ideological pressures at the expense of empirical evidence and the safety of those on the front lines of the ring. Let us commit to a future where every boxer, regardless of their background, can step into the ring confident that the contest is truly even. Because in a sport defined by honor, respect, and hard-fought victories, there is no room for compromises that put fairness and the well-being of our athletes at risk. Yeah.